just want to give you a tiny bit of history of how this came all about. Why we call, for example, dementia forgetfulness here. Anybody have an idea why we would call dementia forgetfulness?
Thank you so much.
Doesn't sound as bad? That's a good reason.
Pathologize.
It doesn't pathologize, right? What else? Doesn't pathologize? Doesn't sound that bad. Do people know what dementia actually means? Huh?
There's different kinds of dementia.
There are different kinds of dementia. The word dementia, what does it actually mean? Think of the root.
That's a dimension, so maybe like not being in the current place, like something about.
Yeah, mental is in there, right? Ment, mented. So demented, dementia, mental health, mental is in there, right? Mind, right? And just like with mental health, we still have yet to come up with the definition of mind, unless somebody came up with. Christina, did you come up with that?
Not yet, I'm working on it.
You're working on that? Because, once you have a definition of mind, then you can talk about what? No mind, which is, or away from mind, which is demented. So literally, demented means away from mind, no mind. And then, of course, as I like to quip, no mind is a state of what?
Happiness.
Happiness, enlightenment in the Buddhist tradition, correct? So therefore, you actually, all of you should be going out there on a banner and say, you can't wait to be demented, which is my slogan, right? I can't wait to be enlightened. And actually not being funny, Smith, our videographer, has actually videotaped last year. Was it last year? I think it was last year. The celebration of Yogi Zinensky, or Wesley Zinensky, who lived with us for 5 years, a yogi, wonderful person who would continually tell his intern that nature was finally finishing up what he wasn't quite able to do himself through meditation, which is no mind, right? So forgetfulness has another idea behind it. Besides, it sounds better. Why would it sound better?
Everybody forgets.
Exactly, that's right. And that relates to quantum physics. How does it relate to quantum physics? Everything is connected. I forget, you forget, he forgets, all of us forget. So we are related. I'm not making myself separate from you. That's a big thing here. I'm not separate from you, right? Everybody picks up what's going on with the other, if they are attuned to it, of course. So in the mid-90s, I became involved in process work, loved the whole idea of the non-pathological model. That's also part of existentialism, some of the strains of existentialism. So from early on, we called forgetfulness. I actually have a hard time even using the word dementia anymore. I was just teaching in Europe, and for them it's so commonplace to call it dementia. It's sad. After a while, when you are in a non-pathological realm, to make people pathologically ill or make them diseased is really hard to bear. Same way that we don't call these places facilities. We call them communities. We emphasize the social aspect of what it is we're doing here. Right? By the way, that was the other thing I forgot. Part of the sciences, social sciences is the other big part. Right? So you have social sciences, physical sciences, you have the emotional sciences, behavioral sciences, and now what's the fifth again? Well, we're going to get it done by the end of the year, I'm sure. So this process work in this setting, I mean, it's perfect in this setting. Why is process work perfect in this setting? What's perfect about it? Why would this be the best place in the world to learn process work?
Because you can't help but get pulled off with them.
You can't help but to?
But get pulled off. Like, if we were talking about the example of being pulled off, like, aging is happening. There's no avoiding it. We can't.
Good thing. Good thing.
We think.
Good thing.
We've
Good
yet
thing
to-
we can't avoid it, right?
We've yet to figure out a pill to stop it. So
Well, we don't want that because there's actually a purpose in aging, right? But this is really one of the many reasons that this is the perfect setting for process work, is because elders are different in the way that they relate to us. I never forget one of the hospice people. Short before his death, I walked in and I wasn't thinking, and I said, "How are you?" And he said, "Oh, shut up." And I said, "Sorry about that." And he said, "Listen, When you're dying, the bullshit stops. There's none of this "how are you" business. I'm here, I'm dying, that's my situation. Let's talk about that. Don't give me this nicety. You know, as they say on the East Coast, in California, they have all these unnecessary pleasantries, right? So certainly we don't have them anymore with people here that are in the latter years. Also, our average life expectancy, just for those who like facts, here is probably about 3 to 4 years. It used to be 10 and more, but now, thanks to medicine and other things, maybe economy, we often get residents or people, as Christina likes to say, in the latter stages. So they're often quite frail, you know. And actually, that's also, maybe they're not quite frail. They're frail from our standard. So we also don't talk about disability. Why don't we talk about disability? It pathologizes, and what is behind disability?
You're not able.
That's right. And behind that is abilities. You see already how all of this is trying to deconstruct norms that actually don't exist, that are completely arbitrary, completely based on a certain time frame, certain culture, certain area. Do you see? Ability. What's an ability? Somebody who doesn't see has an uncanny ability to hear often, right? So I couldn't even get close to it, right? So these are different functional abilities that we're talking about rather than disability. So we're going to get rid of words, any words, be sensitive to that. That in some ways institutionalize things, that in some ways make people wrong, that in some ways imply that there is a standard which doesn't even exist. I mean, that's another scandal I like to talk about. There isn't even a standard. At least it would be one thing if somebody would say, this is the definition of mind, this is the definition of ability, this is the definition of forgetting or remembering. We don't have any of that. I mean, you should get all upset, you know, because it's demeaning. It's putting people down. You have somebody coming to you in a private session, and then you start to diagnose them and somehow put them in boxes. Poor thing. It's just coming to you and say, help me, I'm suffering a little bit. Help me. And then you're going to start with treatment modalities? How terrible is that? Nobody wants to be treated that way. So, yes.
But with all the advancements made in neuroscience, we can look at different parts of the brain that aren't functioning as well.
Beautiful.
And there are medications that can actually help to slow down the process.
Right.
And there are behavioral techniques that can help, you know, family members to better communicate with.
Beautiful, I like that, Alison. Alison has a very good point. We now have neuroscience, and neuroscience might actually be helping us in certain ways. Now, you're absolutely right. If somebody wants to have a certain behavior, if you're checking in with a client, what kind of behavior would you like to be able to do? What kind of state of mind would you like to be into? Then you are working with the client's process. But neuroscience, as I like to say, and you will hear me say that a lot in this year, is a story. It's a narrative. Existentialism is a narrative. Process work is a narrative. All of those will be new narrative. There will be new narratives that will go beyond process work, existentialism. I'm just thinking process work and existentialism are the most comprehensive stories right now that don't need to make other stories wrong. Neuroscience is a story. Nobody has seen a neuron. What you see is your interpretation that thing that shows up under a microscope is called a neuron. But there is no archetype of a neuron. Do you understand? So we can talk about that whole process as well. It's a story, and right now that's a very, very important, popular story. And if a client wants to enter into that with you, perfect.
And
yeah,
I love what you're saying, that process work and existentialism doesn't have to make that story wrong. Mm-hmm. That's right. I agree with that, absolutely. That there are ways to look at what's going on, and there are medicines that can be helpful. Beautiful. And a lot of people here are taking different medicines, that's right. And there are ways of training family members to interact in ways that help the family member to be where their to be where the resident is rather than trying to bring the resident out, right? That's a lot of what I'm going to be doing, is helping train you to interact in ways that are going to be helpful. And I help a lot of family members with people in comas and stuff to interact in ways, that's right, that are helpful. So we don't have to make neuroscience wrong in order to,
Yeah, no, I
right?
agree, absolutely.
I love it. That's a beautiful story. I learn a lot from those stories too. And so I agree. It doesn't have to be a polarization.
That's good. Thank
against
you.
that.
Thank you. I sometimes get triggered by it. Thank you. And I think Lane picked that
You're
up.
you're a social activist. You
Right.
which is beautiful. You have a certain way that is so perfect, that trying to change the world in a way that helps us all to wake up to the beauty of what's happening. Mm-hmm. And sometimes then you tend to marginalize the other side. So I'm here to
Just a
balance
little
that.
bit. Thank
Yeah.
you. Thanks for catching
Yeah.
that. What my issue actually is mostly with, these are all stories, and I think one of the crimes that I see us committing, myself as well, as Lane just pointed out, is the crime of literalism, right? When you actually take things as that is it, right? Like science for a few hundred years has really said the world is that what can be measured, quantified, and repeated. That's the modern scientific theory, and those are the facts. If you have an intuition, if you have a hunch, if you can, from an empirical point of view, prove it, it is not valid. Is that familiar? Is that familiar? Am I summarizing that? Right? So that is a story. It's a great story because we can build beautiful bridges and homes and skyscrapers and go to the moon. So the story, in a certain way, works. What makes it dangerous is if we then start to apply that story to everything. Just like the biomedical paradigm then suddenly gets also applied to psychological, emotional, spiritual suffering, and it might not be appropriate there. It might be great to help you with certain physical issues, but then to apply that also to emotional, spiritual, psychological issues might or might not be good. That's something to discourse. So constantly to be aware that all of these things are narratives and that they are not the truth in themselves. Does that make sense? They're not it. They are just words that are used to describe things. And yeah.
Can I jump in?
Yeah, just one last thing, just before I forget, just here. Because one of my pet pieces, you will always see this brain here. That's the same as brain. And very popular in Alzheimer's associations is what? That you show how the brain has been atrophied according to, right? There's a brain scan, right? And then it says, this is a diseased brain, right? People have seen that? Yeah? Okay. What is that based on, that is a diseased brain?
Comparing it to other brains?
Comparing it to other brains. That's right. Do we know what is the definition here of health?
Normality.
Huh?
Normality.
Right? Probably a statistical average. We don't know if this person is kind, compassionate, or a serial killer, do we? There's a nun study that all of you can Google, the famous nun study, where you had two people that were actually in a, what is it called, nunnery?
Convent.
Convent. And one actually had, according to this disease model, what is it called? A lot of hope, right? But was actually in reality functioning quite normal. The other one, there was another one who had what they call a healthy brain, but actually showed symptoms of what is called in medical literature Alzheimer's, right? So what is that, right? What is that? So this is in many ways, you all know the Rorschach test, right? Mm-hmm. And in some ways, everything, life is a Rorschach test. You impose your reality on it. If you're a neuroscientist, the world is according to neuroscience. That's a great story. If you're a mythologist, it's all mythology, it's archetypes. If you're a process worker like Lane, it's all process unfolding, right? If you're an existentialist, it's all about death and dying and who knows what other cheery topics we can think of, right? So it's just that we know these are stories. And the biomedical story is very strong, and that's why I'm pushing back a little bit, because I almost daily deal with psychiatrists, medication, physicians, nurses that are clearly wanting to use most of the time to just talk about the body values, the body functioning, rather than the emotional, psychological, and spiritual reality. So we have healthy bodies perhaps, or functioning bodies, but what is the purpose? Why get up? Why get up in the morning? You have a healthy body, why live another 20 years if there's nothing for you to be doing? Okay, you go.
So,
Having said that,
thank you. So what does process work that I was explaining before lunch look like in this setting? What does that really mean? So let me start by asking the question. We're talking about forgetfulness, for instance. What's the problem? What are some of the problems with being forgetful? Has anybody ever been forgetful? What's the problem with being forgetful?
It tends to be more of a problem for everyone else and not the person forgetting.
Yeah, that's right. In other words, being forgetfulness impacts your relationships. Okay? What are other problems with forgetfulness?
You might forget to do something that you really absolutely need to do, like take medication.
That's right. You might forget something and that might impact you adversely. What else?
Anxiety about being forgetful.
That's right. A lot of people are forgetful and then they start freaking out that I'm being forgetful, so that it causes anxiety. That's right. What other problems are there with forgetfulness?
You might get lost.
You might get lost. You're wandering around on the streets. You don't know where you are. You don't know who you are. That's right.
You could also be taken advantage of.
That's right. That's right. Okay.
Relational, like if you say you meet someone and then they don't, it kind of breaks that trust.
That's right. That's right. So there's a lot of problems with forgetfulness. Now, what can be beautiful about forgetfulness? Do you ever think about that?
You don't ruminate on your losses.
You don't ruminate on your losses. Yes, that's a big one.
It's easier to be present when you're not thinking about what you need to do or what you want to.
You can be more in the present moment. That's right.
Yeah, like thinking about the person who's lost. They are where they are.
Here I am.
Yeah.
Yes, always. Yes. There's a great thing. I guest teach sometimes at JFK University, and in their somatic psychology department, they have a great bumper sticker. It says, if you lived in your body, you'd be home right now. Yeah, I like that bumper sticker. Yeah.
So they could, with forgetfulness, you could hide your own Easter eggs.
Nice. Nice. That's right.
It's like automatic forgiveness too, because you don't remember any perceived wrongs done to you. You don't remember pain. You don't. It's just easy to be present and to move forward.
Beautiful.
It's graceful.
Beautiful. And then also there's other aspects of forgetfulness where actually you don't remember anything except that. Right? You're back there again and again and again. That's also an aspect of forgetfulness. Right? That's a pain. Right? It's a problem, especially if that you're remembering wasn't a good thing. Right? That's not good. But what might be right about that also? Right?
I mean, like you were talking about with like the woman who said she talked about it and tried everything and finally got through it. Like maybe that's what needs to be worked on. That's what's showing up. That's the issue. That's
Yes, if you keep going back there, it may be that that's coming up again and again because you finally need to get through it. So, right? So there's different ways of looking at things. There's the pathological way, which is right, and there's also another way of looking at it, which is a more gentle, loving, also a gentle, loving way of looking at it. The pathological way is also with love to try to help the person, to put it that way. So now I want to talk, I love teaching with stories. I hope that's okay. So now I want to talk about a story about somebody who's here. I came to visit her. I do sometimes individual intern trainings. I go around with people and people they're having trouble with. So this intern brought me to meet one of her residents, and the resident was sitting there in her wheelchair, and she had a napkin, and she was here, let's pretend this is the napkin, and she was going like this, like that with the napkin. And the resident sat next to her and said, "Hello, Ellie, how are you doing?" I don't remember the woman's name. I'm pretend it's Ellie. "Hello, Ellie, how are you?" Ellie doesn't respond. "Hello, how was lunch?" No response, right? So then afterwards we go off. I talk to the intern, and she says, "This is why I brought you here. I don't know how to get through to her. There's like nothing." I talk to her. She doesn't talk to me. I said, "Well, what did you notice?" Said, "Well, I noticed she wasn't talking to me, and that she's just looking off in the distance." I said, "What did you notice anything about the napkin?" And she said, "Oh yeah, she's doing something with her napkin." I said, "What do you think about that?" She said, it must be a way of dealing with her anxiety. She's trying to calm herself down. That was her hypothesis. I said, "That's an interesting hypothesis. That's a very interesting hypothesis." I said, "Let's see what happens." So we went back, and this time I interacted with Ellie. And this time I sat across from Ellie instead of next to Ellie. And I sat down, and I didn't say anything because Ellie didn't really like to talk very much. It's not just forgetfulness. Sometimes there's aphasia and different kinds of speech problems, right? People aren't necessarily going to speak in a way that, right, that you would normally think they're going to. So she started to go like that with her napkin. So I went on the other side of her napkin a little bit, and I touched her napkin just for a second. And then I pulled my hand away. And then Ellie kept doing this. And then I went like that a little bit, and I pulled my hand away. And then Ellie did this some more. That was contact. And so I did that, and we had this little game where we're both going like that. Every once in a while, I would go a little closer, and then I would dart away. She would go a little closer. She would dart away. After about 5 minutes, I was going like this, and she went over and she touched my finger. And I just waited. And then she grabbed my finger, and she looked right at me. And I said, "Hello." And that was contact. Right? That's process work in this setting, right? It's not thinking there's something wrong with Ellie. This is the non-pathological thing that Nader is talking about. It's not there's something wrong with Ellie. We have to fix her aphasia and her lack of relatedness, right? But there's something wrong with us, that we're not meeting Ellie where she is. By noticing what's happening and following what's happening instead of trying to impose what we think should be happening. Okay. You want to add anything to that?
I mean, I think it's just, all I can think is just what we were talking about this morning, that to constantly be noticing your own process in this. This is really ultimately the big learning that I'm hoping that you can take away from this in this year. What is going on? Because for Lane to be doing this, I mean, it sounds easy at that moment, but you got to be really noticing what is happening there, and that I'm not going to come from a mindset of I got to do something big here or whatever. I mean, that's a very moving moment, right? And that's contact.
And in terms of my process, right? If I think Ellie has a problem with relationship, Ellie has a problem because she's not in contact, and I'm not also thinking Lane has a problem with relationship, Lane has a problem because he doesn't know how to make contact. Instead of Ellie doesn't know how to make contact, Lane doesn't know how to make contact. And then that's my work on myself, rather than thinking she has to do the work on herself. And by me doing the work on myself, that helps her to do the work on herself also. She does actually learn how to make contact through that, right? So I'm going to give another little example. Go on.
You know, and just that idea that the moment, which is a wonderful thing I like about process work, bless you, where actually there's a part of me that wants to say, oh, Tom is depressed. And then I look at Tom and I see depression or whatever, and then to step back and for a moment and think, aha, what's in me that's depressed? You know, what am I putting on Tom at the moment that I should actually be looking at in myself? And then we should actually be thinking depression, what is actually meant by that, right? And Arnie is very famous for actually saying, I don't know what you mean by that. Do it. Do depression for me, right? So I actually know what you mean by this incredibly complex term. And that's also one thing I'd like you to take away. Oh my goodness, look at our
My hummingbird, right?
Caught in a glass cage.
Caught in a, crashing into a window. Yes.
Trying to get out.
Yes.
Freedom to be.
Yes. This is the thing. What's the best way to try to help somebody? If you're trying to help somebody with their anxiety, for instance, is going to make them more anxious, is that help? There's a great story from Chuang Tzu. He's another Taoist, and he talks about the Taoist butcher. And he says, the emperor asks the butcher, how often do you have to sharpen your knife? And the butcher says, oh, if you're a bad butcher and you cut right through the bone, you have to throw your knife away once a year. If you're a good butcher and you cut right next to the bone, you have to sharpen your knife once a year. He said, but I find the place in between the bone and the meat, so my knife never touches anything. So I never have to sharpen my knife. And every once in a while I get to a particularly difficult joint and I wait there and I meditate until I find the hole. And then I just flick my knife and the whole leg of the cow falls off. So I call those moments Taoist butcher moments, where you're not quite sure what the solution is and you just wait there until it appears. Right? Taoist butcher moment. Another story. So somebody in the dining room, there, I walk in on the floor, and there's a woman screaming at the top of her lungs, no, no, no! And there's a care partner who's trying to take the woman somewhere. And the woman is saying, no! And the care partner says, no, come on, we have to go. And the woman grabs onto the corner of the table with her hands until her knuckles are white, holding on. And I go in, and first of all, the care partner is behind the woman in her wheelchair and speaking from above, which I don't know, have you done the wheelchair training yet? You're going to do that this afternoon. It's not very pleasant to be spoken to from above. So instead, I got down on my knees at the woman's eye level, and I said, hello. And she looked at me and she smiled. She said, hello. She stopped screaming. I said, how's it going? She said, she wants to take me somewhere. I said, where do you want to go? She said, I wanted to go out on the balcony. And I said, okay. Is that okay? I said to the care partner, can I take her to the balcony? And the care partner said, okay. So I wheeled her to the balcony and sat her down next to a couple of other people, chatted with her for a while, and then went back in. And I asked the care partner what was going on. And the care partner said, oh, we were supposed to bring her to this area because she likes that area. And so I said, oh, that's interesting. She likes that area. So then I went back out and I said, are you enjoying the balcony? And she said, it's nice. I said, would you rather be in that area there? She said, yes, I like that very much. So I brought her back over to that area, right? So it's basic humanity, right? Is if somebody says no, then it basically means no. That if there's something happening, basic humanity. Now, all right, is that what you could call that being a traffic cop, or you could call that conflict resolution, or you could call that contact. I tend to call that contact. One of the people here said that as the elder that you noted, that you were wondering about this morning, that one of the things you need is just to be with somebody, right? I would call that therapy, actually, being with somebody in a respectful way. This is not exactly talk therapy. This is not finding out about their childhood issues and stuff like that, but I would call that a kind of therapy, respecting somebody. Yeah.
Thanks for reminding me. I mean, this is going to be a conversation or a topic that will come up again and again. What is therapy? And we have a definition of therapy, right? Do you guys have a definition? Do you have an idea of what is therapy? What are we being told? What is therapy? I mean, most of you want to be therapists, I assume, right?
It's companioning.
Companionship. Okay. What else? Listening. Okay.
Helping someone dealing.
Yeah, that's one too. Yeah.
Helping someone deal with internal conflict and
Okay.
defenses.
Helping with conflict and defenses.
Achieving discrete and quantifiable goals.
Say that again.
Achieving discrete and quantifiable goals.
Achieving discrete and quantifiable goals. Cognitive reframing. Good.
Yes, bearing witness.
Bearing witness.
Kind of providing a mirror sometimes.
Being a mirror. Okay. Mirroring back. Right. Containment. Right. Containment.
I'm trying to remember the root of therapy. Therapy is literally caring.
Yeah, I used to know that. That seems therapia. Yeah, somebody look that up. That's good. Therapy, right? Thera, I forget about that. I think it's maybe caring. You're right. Therapeutic. Well, in this setting, I mean, these are great and all of them are valid. In this setting, I think largely therapeutic is about an attitude, right? If I'm standing here with Lane and he is lost in thought, or he's in thought, or he seems somewhere, my actually wanting to just be there with him in that moment and just and being aware that he actually is in some space and being there with him is what I would call therapeutic. If Lane now says he's now walking a little bit, and my just being with him in that, and maybe not saying anything because I'm sensing he's actually not very communicative. He doesn't want to be in a space of talking. That to me is therapeutic. If Lane wants to go with me to the coffee shop because he hasn't had a coffee today, or that's kind of his idea of relating. It's a social aspect. That's therapeutic, right? Because it's my attitude mostly that makes it so. Because you will agree, I can walk with him and I can be in my thoughts and he can be in his thoughts, right? That's not very therapeutic because I'm in my world. I'm thinking about picking up my dry cleaning, doing my paper, finishing this and finishing that. But I'm actually with him musing because of our interconnectedness. That's what we call therapy. So we have quite a bit of this going on in our communities. The walking with, right? You take a walk with someone in that kind of therapeutic awareness and attitude. You go to the coffee shop, you go to the grocery store, you pick up something, you're going with. And while you're going with, you're being with. That's therapeutic, right? And if, what are some of the, have some of you read the research? I think there's some empirical studies on what are the 6 most important factors that make for a good therapist. If you ask, because there are clinical reviews, right, clinical studies that say, that ask clients, what was the, let's just say, what were the most important factors for you that helped you through this process? What do you think they would say?
Sympathy.
Empathy.
Connection.
Connection, exactly. Containment. Attunement, that's right. You're really speaking together about relationship. And actually, the word used by most people for the therapeutic success, or that they use to describe the therapeutic success that they're part of, is warmth. The warmth of the therapist. So how warm, which is empathy, which is attunement, how warm did they feel the therapist being, right? So that's really what you're going to be dealing with.
There's somebody here named Joy. She's a great character. And yeah, you remember Joy? Yes, yes. So yes, she's incredible, and challenging, and challenging. So there was an intern who had no idea what to do with Joy, no idea what to do with Joy. So she brought me to hang out with Joy, and the intern started to talk to Joy, and Joy didn't even pay attention to what the intern was saying, as if she wasn't even there. She just like brushed her off. The intern was speaking very quickly and mumbling a little bit, and Joy is not from here. She's Chinese.
Little Asian lady.
Yeah.
This big, this small.
Yes. And so I sat next to Joy, and I said, hello. And she looked at me, because I didn't say like a whole bunch of sentences at the same time. I just said, hello. And she said, hello. And so we started to talk, and Joy was only talking about her family. My husband, he's going to come. My husband, he's going to come. He's going to come. Her husband never comes, I think. But I don't even know if her husband's alive. My husband, he's going to come. I said, oh, that's wonderful. Tell me about your husband. Oh, my husband, he's wonderful. He's wonderful. Oh, he's so smart. He can speak English and Chinese. He's very smart, my husband. Oh, my husband, oh, he cooks very well. He cooks so well. My children, my children, my children. Oh, my children, they're so smart. They can speak English and Chinese, and they're so smart. They're going to come. They're going to come right now. I have to get ready for my children to come. Tell me about your children. They're so smart, and they're so good looking. And they're so good looking. Oh, you're good looking. You're good looking too. Oh, and her, she noticed the intern for the first. Are you too? Oh, good looking, nice, nice. My children are very good looking. Now, let's think about this in terms of therapy. Okay. So far, it's a nice conversation. It's the contact, it's the empathy, right? But now let's think of what you said, I think, helping somebody deal with an internal conflict. Okay? From my ears, I hear that, and I hear somebody who says everybody else is smart and good looking and can cook really well, but I'm nothing, basically. Everybody else is somebody. So that was my hypothesis. So I said to her, oh, I love that scarf that you're wearing. What a beautiful scarf you have on. And of course, she said, no, 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 your clothes are very nice. Your clothes are very nice. Did I tell you that my husband is coming and he's very good looking? Right? So here's an internal conflict, right? We could call this a low self-esteem, or we could call this projecting your brilliance onto everybody else, right? We could call it a lot of different things, right? But by the end of that conversation, I asked her, for instance, if she knows how to cook, right? Everybody else was such a good cook. Oh, yes, I can cook. I started to ask her her favorite things to cook. She started to talk about her cooking. Then I started to say, wow, can you speak English and Chinese? And she sat up a little bit straighter in her chair. And she said, yes. I said, wow, you are really smart. She said, really? I said, wow, that's incredible to be able to speak English and Chinese, right? Helping her to, right, this is a basic psychological thing, helping her to internalize her projections onto the other people and realize that actually she isn't only a little piece of dirt and everybody else is so great. That's therapy. By the end of that session, she was a foot taller than she was when I came to sit with her. And she was feeling good about herself. And by the time you see her, that will be gone, and she'll need it again.
Like most of us.
Yes, that's right. That's right.
I was going to do what Lei mentioned reminded me of one very important act that I would like all of you to engage in once you start working on the floor, which is, where's Ovid? Ovid is hired. Oh,
Yeah.
okay. Which is the, when you are encountering somebody like Joy, whom you will encounter, and all of the residents here, we just about have 90 residents, one of the core first steps I would like you to undertake is to get to know the care partner that is working with these residents. So I want to let you know what a care partner looks like. Ovid, this is one of the care partners, and he has been with us ever since birth, just about. He started 17 years ago across the street, and so he works Case Valley Care, but we're also trying to have care partners work everywhere. But Ovid, he knows the residents, of course, on his floor, you know, in that building, like no one else, right? Because he works intimately with them and has a wealth of knowledge and a wealth of experience about each resident. So the first thing, what would you, now Ovid has gone through 16, 17 internet rotations. What do you think would be very helpful for these interns, specifically interns? These are the interns.
Hi, welcome. Welcome to the family. We call it family.
So what do you think they can do? What would be the first step? Because they're going to come, some of them are going to be shy, they're going to stay there, and then what do you think?
I think the best thing you guys can do is to ask us, because we are working close to the resident. We are on hand to the resident. So anything you want to know about the resident, I think we are a big help for you guys. Before you go close to the resident, ask us, because sometimes that resident don't know what they're talking about. At least I can tell you how it works.
So Ovid will give you his
I
idea.
give you all the ideas that I have.
That's right, that's right. So then, so you think they can just come up to Care Partners and introduce
Yes,
themselves?
anytime, yes.
You don't bite or do any of that, you're kind of normal.
We don't buy, we don't eat, we are very sweet over there, all of us. All of us are so sweet.
Good, good. What else do you think you can tell them about our people within here?
Anything you see about our resident, don't jump into conclusion. Ask us first, because some residents are saying something that is without they know what they are talking about. So it's a big help for us if you ask us, because we had an experience to a lot of interns here that they call ombudsman, they call licensing, because this resident is complaining a lot of things.
Yeah,
So-
we have a 300% increase of elder abuse in the first week when interns start.
Every year.
That's every year.
And because it is, we talked about it this morning, it is so complex and so rich and so unknown, because for many, many people out there in probably most countries, it is not a very standard practice that anybody under 50 or 60 would enter a home like that. Most people coming here have to place the mom and dad, or if they don't have family, they place themselves, or somebody places them. That's standard. We are not, as I would like to see H-Song evolve into a video parlor where actually youngsters can't wait to go and play and be. That would be the idea, to actually create elder communities where we can't wait to just show up because this is the house of the wise in some respect. But we are still, for all the reasons of the anti-aging ideas and the youth-inspired culture and so forth, we're still a few months away from getting there, right? So the idea of really checking with the care partners, in our 17-year history, there hasn't been one documented case of elder abuse. So there's a lot of different stories, and maybe at one point Ayn will talk about different states of reality, so that we don't mistake consensus reality, that's a window and that's a window, with other dreamland or subjective realities that we can all experience. I'm sure some of you, while I'm talking, are sitting in Saint-Tropez, sipping a little cafe latte or something, right? And can't wait to already are home, having a glass of wine, whatever. So there are different realities happening other than just our reality right now here. So, and there's one more care partner that's been with us for 17 years. Blanca, come on, come to the front. She's a little shy. She's also working in the older building, and Blanca's on the ground floor, and we go way back. She has heard me talk about Heidegger and Hegel, and she knows a lot about philosophy, remember?
Yes.
Yes, yes. So what do you think you can tell our students here, our interns, what would be helpful for them in the first week or 2 or 3 when they come in?
Okay. First, nice to meet you, and very welcome here. And we are here, the care partner, to help you too. We can work together. That's the best way to do it. Yeah.
And so how can you, what do you think? So they come in on Monday, and then what? And then they see you, and
Yeah, they can come to us. We can go with them. You know, we can show them the resident, what they like, everything. You know,
introduce
the
them.
resident. Yeah.
Beautiful. Good, good, good. And do you know the residents quite well?
Oh, and they know me very well. Yeah.
They know you very well.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah, yeah. Beautiful. So anyway, so I really encourage you on each floor, just go up first to the care partners, introduce yourself, and so forth. Make contact. They're your best friends, they're your best allies, and really to work together. They are really, in some ways, the foundation of the whole organization. Without their love and care, I mean, that's what we're famous for, is the Ovids and Blancas of the world. That's what we are famous for. And of course, you coming in and really doing meaning-based activities or meaning-based work with our residents. That's the other part that really is outstanding for our work here. Good. Thanks, Ovid. Thank you, Blanca.